Hey everybody, it's Dominique with This Girl's Worth, and I wanted to share this video with you. We're going to be talking about the importance of healing your relationship with your parents. So I know that we all come from different backgrounds and different relationships with our parents, and it's really tricky to understand how to navigate these relationships because our parents are the first relationships that we build. They're our protectors, they're our covering, they're our sense of livelihood as a child. And as we're developing ourselves, we develop our relationship with our parents. And our parents are not perfect. Sometimes they can hurt us. And even if we recognize now as adults that we had the best parents possible, that we feel like we had the best parents in the world, sometimes there's still hurts that we don't want to deal with, and truths and things that we feel like we didn't have enough support in certain areas, or we weren't loved in certain areas, or we didn't have enough guidance in certain areas. And when we're dealing with that, sometimes it can be really easy to be frustrated with your parents, to hate your parents, to look down on your parents, to look at other parents and to say, I wish my mom was like this person's parent, or I wish my mom handled this in this way. It can be really difficult to navigate those relationships with our parents. Truthfully, our parents' relationships are so crucial because what we don't have from them, we're going to seek from other people in the world. And what we don't heal from with our parents, we carry with us in other relationships. If our parents were emotionally disconnected to us, that creates emotional wounds inside of us that makes us sometimes narcissistic, anxious, depressed, and all these other things. And we don't understand how we're dealing with all of these mental challenges. And a lot of times we can look back and reflect, and it'll give us a lot of understanding of our own behaviors, our own thought processes, our own how we go about the world and how we engage with the world. And so while I'm not going to go into the psychoanalytical part of it because I'm not a psychologist, it's not my expertise, I'm going to talk about that there are a lot of people who are carrying a lot of weight when it comes to parental relationships. You think about your parents, you don't get along with your parents, you avoid your parents. You say, my dad should have been like this, my mom should have been like this, my dad wasn't like this when I grew up, I wish I had a dad like this, I wish I had a mom like this, or mom, you weren't there for me in my most crucial moment, dad, you weren't there for me in my most crucial moment, mom, dad, you failed me in this way, mom, dad, you were lying, you were manipulative, you were whatever it was that you dealt with in your own childhood, in your own home. Maybe you went through a situation alone. Your parents didn't have the capacity to be there for you. Maybe you really wanted to do something that was really important to you, and your parents just shut it out like it wasn't important, like it didn't matter. There's so many things that can happen that really put a crack in our lens in how we engage with the world. There's a lot of trauma, and most of our trauma forms from how our parents handled our pain and our life's experiences. And why am I making this video? Because I can't speak to your particular situation. I'm not telling you that everything that your parents do is easily forgivable and you just forgettable. That's not everyone's situation. There are some people who experience a lot of really horrible abuse on behalf of their parents. And while I do encourage everyone to forgive, forgiveness is on your own timeline. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. Forgiveness does not necessarily mean that you need to have another conversation with that person. Sometimes forgiveness is just accepting what happened as it is and choosing not to harbor anger or ill will towards that person. And while I do believe forgiveness is important, I want to encourage you today in this video to look at your parents as human beings. And when we look at our parents as human beings, we take them out of the roles that we've assigned to them. Roles are not a bad thing. Roles are a good thing. I want to be a wife someday. That's a role. I want a husband someday. That's a role. I have sisters and brothers and a mom and a dad and family members and teachers and professors, and I have bosses and coworkers, and these are all roles. But underneath the role is a person. And when we look at these people outside of the role that's assigned to them, we take away the expectation. Why is that so important? Because when we think about mom and dad did this, mom and dad did this, mom and dad weren't this, my sister wasn't this, my brother wasn't this, when we start thinking about and we build up that list, those lists of things that they weren't, and the list of ways that the people have failed us, and the list of ways that we weren't supported the way we needed to, and the list of ways that our parents could have been better compared to other parents. When we start to look at them as people, we start to say, what are they bringing to the table, and what are they working with what they gave me? Your parents, for most of us, did the best that they could to give us the best of what they had. And sometimes our parents came from really messed up backgrounds. Sometimes our parents have been abused. Sometimes our parents have been neglected. Sometimes our parents have been mistreated. And you think that once they have children, this all of a sudden all of the pain and hurt and trauma that they've had will just disappear, and they'll know how to treat you with all the love, consideration, and read your mind. But that's not true. Our parents are human beings. And there are days that they have bad days. There are days when their trauma affects them. There are days when they have great days and they're excelling. They're doing the best that they can. And some days they probably could have done a little bit more, and some days they probably did a little bit too much. Our parents are just human beings. And when we look at them as just human beings, we look at people as just human beings, we recognize they have an ability to be deeply flawed. And while that doesn't necessarily take away the hurt or the pain or the disappointment that you've experienced, when we look at our parents as human beings, we start to say, they're humans, which means that they can mess up just like I can mess up. They can mess up just like anybody else. They can make mistakes. They can lie. They can do the wrong thing sometimes because they're just people. My parents are just people. That's never going to take away from the level of respect that you have for your parents. That's never going to take away from the love that you have for your parents. But what it does is it frees up that mental space where you have all this expectation in your mind about who your parents are supposed to be, who that person was supposed to be to you. And it takes the weight off of the mistake that they made. Not for them, but for you. Because if you look at that person and you say, I know that person wasn't there for me. They were supposed to be there for me because they're my mom. And you recognize she's my mom, but she's a human being. And sometimes she doesn't know how to be there for me as a human being. I don't know how to be there for people all the time as a human being. I don't. And so you have to understand that while you're healing from your pain and you're understanding yourself and you're looking into these parental relationships and you're looking at your relationship with your mother and your father and your siblings and even family members, extended family members who maybe you grew up close to, or maybe teachers who hurt you, or your bosses or your coworkers, and you're thinking they're not supposed to do that because of the role that they play. You have to understand we're all human beings, and sometimes what should happen is not what happens. And sometimes what could happen is the thing that we don't want to happen or we don't ever think will happen. Same thing with our parents. Our parents didn't intentionally disappoint us. Our parents didn't intentionally cause trauma to us. Our parents didn't intentionally try to hurt our feelings. Our parents took the little bit that they received from whatever their background is, whatever trauma they have, whatever pain, whatever experiences, and then they tried to give us something out of that. They tried to give us something to work with out of that. And so you have to ask yourself, did my parents do their best? Did they do their best? Ask yourself honestly, did my parents do their best? And if you can honestly say, my parents did the best that they could, not what I expected, they did the best that they could, then it might be worthwhile to start to say, my parents are just human beings and they did the best that they could. And now it's up to me to figure out how to take the missing pieces and to create the life that I want, to create the love that I want, to create the relationships that I want, to forgive myself for the things I didn't know better, to forgive them for the things they didn't know better, to recognize that as they're growing, I'm growing. Just an example, like when I think back on my parents, I'm like, my parents were my age trying to raise me. And when I think about all the things that I'm trying to heal from now and understand now and dissect now about myself and the things I'm uncovering about myself, that I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like this part of me. I don't like this reaction. Or I did a thing and I'm like, actually, this isn't me, that I've been holding on to for so long. And when I begin to break that and uncover that, and I recognize, whoa, you have some things that you're working on dismantling. Same thing when I think about my parents. I'm like, my parents were, it's getting dark now. My parents were my age trying to raise me. And when I think about all the things that I'm working on in myself now, the things that I've uncovered, I'm 25 now. I'm not the same person I was when I was 23. I'm not the same person I was when I was 24. I'm not the same person I was when I was 20 years old. I couldn't imagine learning all the stuff that I'm learning now about my own pain, my own trauma, my own history, my own behavior patterns, learning all of that, and then also trying to be responsible for the entire emotional, physical, mental well-being of a human being, and trying to raise them so that they can be fully competent in themselves with all the correct skills in life. It's just not possible. It's not possible for you to do it without a couple of mistakes. It's not possible for you to do it without learning more about yourself in the process. And that's why we have to understand that our parents are human beings and they're learning and they're working and they're growing just as we are. And I know that there are some pains and traumas that some people have to, some people have been through really worse things with their parents, such as sexual abuse, physical abuse, literal mental and verbal abuse from their parents. And that has taken a toll on them. And so they've said, I need to separate. I will never ever tell you that you should have people in your life based off of the role. I think you should have people in your life who enrich you, who love you, who encourage you. There's nowhere that it tells you that you need to, I don't see anywhere in the Bible that says, hey, I know your family member's toxic, but because they're your family, you have to stick around them and deal with them day to day. There's nothing in the Bible that says that. And so that's what I'm telling you, is that recognizing this and learning for your own healing journey and learning how to process other people has nothing to do with letting them off the hook. It has everything instead to do with the amount of anger and hurt and frustration and pain that you carry on the inside of you. What this does is that it changes your expectation. So then this person has a lot that they're dealing with, that I can't expect certain things from them because of what they've been through. And they're not at that place to give that love to me, to give that validation to me, to give that peace to me, to have those kinds of conversations. So then what they're carrying, so that you don't expect things out of them, and then you end up in a cycle of disappointment. You're still expecting certain things from your parents that your parents have demonstrated that they're not capable of giving you. You're still thinking, but this is supposed to be my mom, this is supposed to be my dad, she's supposed to be my sister. And you have to recognize the role doesn't change the person. The role doesn't, just having the role itself, having the title doesn't make a person qualified for the job. It doesn't make the person qualified for every single responsibility in that job itself. Your parents could still be great parents. They still could have loved you and done everything they could to protect you, and still missed the mark in some ways. So I want you to understand that as I'm saying these things, as I'm saying, you have to look at your parents as humans. I'm not saying you have to erase what they've done. I'm not saying you have to take off the feelings that you have. What you have is real. Those feelings are real. Instead, I'm encouraging you to recognize that because they're human beings, they have limitations. And unfortunately, we don't get to choose other people's limitations. And so your mom and your dad, your sister, your brother, whoever it is that you're still harboring that relationship for, and you're saying, I want it to look this way. I have this expectation of what should be. What should be. What should be is so dangerous to us because we can't control what should be. Instead, we have to look at what is, and then we have to properly prepare ourselves for that. If you know that you have someone that you can't go to and talk to about your feelings, don't continue to try to force your feelings upon that person to talk to and communicate with them. Because if you get shut down, it's painful. It's going to continue to perpetuate a pain cycle in you. And you don't want to go through that. You want to protect yourself. You want to guard yourself. You want to love yourself. And you begin to love other people and see the beauty in other people the more that you look at them as human beings. The more you say, they're not perfect, and that's okay. They don't know what they're doing, and that's okay. We haven't figured everything out yet, and that's okay. They haven't figured everything out yet, and that's okay. They've made mistakes, and that's okay. I'm still working on my own stuff about how you've affected me, but you're still a human being. You're still a human being at the end of the day. You're not just my mom. You're not just my dad. Your life didn't begin when you became my parent. You had a whole life before me, and some of that life included a lot of pain, a lot of you doing things on your own, a lot of you trying to figure things out. And I came along into the picture, and you tried to give me the best of what you could, and I had my own expectations that didn't allow me to see what was really going on with you. And that's why, on another note, it's really important that parents share their stories with their children, that they share. I understand some parents, you don't have to tell your children every single thing that happened to you. You're allowed privacy, you're allowed your own secrets and your own secrets with God. You're allowed your own privacy. But it's so important that your children don't see you as perfect human beings, that they don't see you as always trying to be strong and always having it together. Your children need to know that you are a human being and that you have experiences that you're still working through as well. Because then it'll give them the freedom and the liberty to work through their own experiences as well. And to see you not only as their parent or their mom or their dad, but to see you as a human being. It's so important. So hopefully this video was encouraging for someone who's maybe struggling with their parental relationship, struggling with how to heal with their relationship with their mom and dad, maybe you've been trying, maybe you've been trying to communicate. Maybe this will help you change up your strategy of, instead of trying to get them to fulfill a role that you've always needed them to fulfill for you, and instead you start to look at them with realistic expectations about who they are, and then you go into the world and you create the relationships that are healthy for you, that give you the emotional validation, that give you the ability to speak about how you feel, that give you an opportunity to be the full version of you you've always wanted to be. I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Hope you're having a great night. It's getting dark here again. Bye.